I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the land we're on. Pay respects to their elders past and present. We're all part of a big struggle for justice, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, we have to keep fighting till we win. So today is a global Trade Union Day of action for the Filipino trade unionists who are suffering very intense repression. Since President Duterte came to power in July 2016, 50 trade union leaders have been killed in the Philippines. None of these cases has been properly investigated. The Philippines consistently ranks in the group of 10 worst countries in the world for trade union rights. In June 2019, the International Labour Organization Conference voted to send a high-level tripartite mission to the Philippines to investigate. Tripartite means the mission will include trade union representatives as well as government and employer representatives. The Duterte government has so far blocked the entry of this high-level mission, part of a pattern of his behaviour which is to hide his crimes from international scrutiny. So we are here today to call out loudly for the entry of the ILO high-level tripartite mission into the Philippines without further delay.
We acknowledge that we meet on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and we pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, always will be Aboriginal land. Now the AMW nationally stands in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in the Philippines. We understand that if we were in the Philippines now, trying to meet like this, not all of you would make it home. And that's quite something to think about, isn't it? That you will be targeted, that you will disappear, that you will face arrest under spurious laws designed to oppress the people and take away their rights. And the trade unionists in the Philippines cannot win this fight by themselves. We have to stand with them, we have to stand strong, and we have to put pressure on our own government. We have to put pressure through the International Labour Organisation as well. It has to be an international campaign to stop the killings, to stop the terrorism against the people of the Philippines by an evil regime that is not a democracy. It's an oligarchy of the mates designed to crush the people and further their own interests. So unless we speak out, unless we turn up, unless we turn out, and unless we take this information back to our unions and our members, this will not stop. So AMW commits to fight with Philippine trade unions movement, to stand strong, to educate, to inform and to carry the fight up to the federal government and into the international forum. So we commend the campaign that is coming from the KMU to everybody here, and that we take it forward, we help them win. Because unionism is international solidarity, and we're going to make it real along with you. So thank you.
Kicking off this global day of action, trade union action for the Philippines all around the world. And in every continent today, across the globe, unions will be standing up outside Philippines consulates and embassy like we are today to say enough is enough and hands off. So it's fantastic to see you all today here, and there are also rallies happening in Perth and Canberra, and then consequently around the globe as the world wakes up to this global day of action. It's fantastic to see you all here today. As we know, repression of trade unions in the Philippines is intensifying under President Duterte's leadership and under his new anti-terror law. Human rights and trade union rights are under serious threat, and red tagging of unionists and unsolved killings of trade unionists needs our global action. So today, Filipino workers and unions are united in their call for the following. Now bear with me with my language skills here. Trabajo, Karapatan, Kalagtasan, Panangutan. And that means jobs, rights, safety, accountability. Can I hear you say that with me? Jobs, rights, safety, accountability. Again, one more time. Jobs, rights, safety, accountability. There is no excuse for the Duterte regime to continue its terror against trade unionists and human rights activists. So today we send a message to the Duterte administration that the state-sanctioned vilification, harassments, false imprisonments and killings of trade unionists must end. The world is watching, and we are kicking off in Sydney, followed by Canberra, Perth, across Africa, across the whole of Asia, then Europe and the American continent, where trade unionists will gather on this global day of action. I also want to let you know that in February this year, when union leaders from the Philippines visited Australia, our government agreed, they made a commitment to meet regularly with trade unions via the Australian Embassy in Manila. And at the time, unions asked Australia to stop funding military and police programs via its aid program, given the extreme situation. Australia gives in excess of $40 million for military and police cooperation programs under the banner of counter-terrorism. And while human rights abuses continue, this is tantamount to blood money. However, recently, the Defence Minister Linda Reynolds was in the Philippines in October, and not only did she make a commitment to continue funding this program, she actually said that they would deepen the defence ties between Australia and the Philippines, which is shocking, given that the Philippines has killed over 50 trade unionists, countless other human rights and social justice defenders, and more than that, as you know, they have killed over 30,000 people under the so-called war on drugs. And these people are mainly poor people. There is no excuse for this murder. So today, all of the ACTU, AFIDA and unions around the world are calling for the following. And the ACTU has written to President Duterte outlining these demands. We're asking that the voice of working people in the Philippines be listened to, and that the government take the following action. 1, to stop red tagging against trade unions and civil society organisations and demand accountability for the extrajudicial killings. 2, to repeal the Anti-Terrorism Act and the implementation regulations. 3, to provide health, security and safety at work for all. And 4, to provide job and income protection in public employment programs. And 5, accept the high-level ILO mission to the Philippines so that they can be held to account for their human rights and trade union violations. So in closing, I want you to join with me together for another chant for the demands that the Filipino trade union movement and workers have called on today. Jobs, rights, safety and accountability. Jobs, rights, safety, accountability. Jobs, rights, safety, accountability. Thank you, everyone.
As you're aware, democracy is under threat everywhere. And democracy can only ever be a democracy if dissent can flourish. And dissent must flourish. What we're seeing is a creeping authoritarianism across the country to the world, and some are worse than others. And the Philippines, as indicated by the previous speaker, is one such country. There is significant trade union repression of all the sects. And you might ask why that's important to Australian workers. Well, simply put, Australian workers and Filipino workers are workers together. And Filipino workers are engaged in Australia on projects. Why that's important? Recently, has been dealing with an anti-union company, a virulently anti-union company called Austell in Western Australia. Now, Austell have sites across the world. In the US, they're an Australian company, they've got sites in the US, sites in the Philippines, sites in Vietnam, and obviously the site in the West, 3 sites in WA. Austell brought over Filipino workers to work building Australian ships for the ADF, for the Australian Defence Force, and the Trinidad and Tobago Defence Force on $90 a week. $90 a week. Their accommodation was an all-in rental which you wouldn't put pets in. It was a disgrace. Those workers came to us and we championed those workers, but you can't fault their courage because they knew what was going to happen. As soon as they stuck their hand up, they were going to go back to the Philippines. What happened was the EGU picked that up and went with a Fair Work Ombudsman. That case is under active investigation now, and we're confident it will result in 2 things. One is significant back pay for those Filipino workers back in the Philippines now, and significant fines for Austell shipbuilding in the West. And that's important because these employers that encourage this activity have to be punished. There has to be sanctions against them. But what about the Filipino workers? And that's all we're here today. And as soon as they stuck their hand in the air, they were sent back to the Philippines the following week.
Shame!
The following week they were sent
Shame!
back. And that is a shame. It is a shame. And they need protection. And that's why we're here today, to ensure that there's a global effort to increase protection for all workers in the Philippines and ensure that they're not compromising their safety or their health by their own government. So I ask you to stand strong, send the message across the country and across the world to protect Filipino workers and all workers, and to ensure that awful repressive governments like the one that exists in the Philippines are sent packing as soon as possible. Thanks again for today.
Good day, everybody. My name is Edwin Subijano. I'm the public officer for Migrante, New South Wales. First of all, let me acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and I'll be reading to you the statement of Migrante Australia. Migrante Australia, a national alliance of Filipino migrant organizations, stands united with the Australian Council of Trade Unions in the global mass campaign against red-tagging union leaders and workers to silence them from pursuing their legitimate rights at work. The Duterte government must be held accountable for its blatant disrespect of human rights and trade union rights in the Philippines. Silusang May 1, May 1 movement in the Philippines and Migrante Australia are concerned about the implementing rules and regulations of the dreaded Anti-Terror Act, Republic Act number 11479, issued by the Anti-Terror Council on October 20, 2020. The IRR legitimizes attacks on trade union leaders and workers. President Duterte issued EO Executive Order 17 December 2018, and under it, the National Task Force to end local communist armed conflict, known as NTF-LCAC. NTF-LCAC has made its mission to red tag any individual and any organization critical of government policies that are insensitive to the real needs of the Filipino people. They associate activism to silence opposition. Migrante Australia, the global mass actions in support of the following demands of the workers and allied organizations to the Duterte government. Stop the red tagging of activities against trade unions and other legitimate organizations, and to hold accountable those responsible for it, especially those involved in extradition killings. Number 2, scrap the Anti-Terrorism Act and its implementing rules and regulations. Number 3, ensure the health, security, and safety at work of all workers. Number 4, protect the jobs and income of the Filipino workers and embark on massive public employment programs. Number 5, free detained trade union leaders and political activists on trap-up charges. Stop Australian military aid to the Philippines. Migrante Australia also denounces the Philippine National Police in the red tagging of organizations including Bayan Australia, Briella, and Anak Bayan that already has been tagged as such by the NTF-LTAC. The ruthless and systematic red tagging of progressive individuals and organizations in Australia is a manifestation of the heightening repressiveness of the Philippine government. This red tagging must stop. Support the Trade Union Global Day of Action for Filipino Workers.
Too, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, pay our respects to elders past and present. Also, I'd like to show solidarity with the FIDA. Thank you for organising this morning, Kate. And this is such an important issue in relation to where we stand as Australians and what solidarity we have with the Philippines. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues here from the Teachers Federation. They're also members of the International Education Union. And we are here specifically to support our colleagues in the Philippines who are also trade union and also teachers who are directly affected by this disgraceful terrorism on trade unions and any public sector workers in the Philippines. In this COVID period, as Kate has said, it's so important for the Philippine government to start now looking at public sector jobs to make the economy grow again. And at this time, when we can freely stand here in the Philippines, they can't. In this time when we can freely collectively bargain in the Philippines, they can't. And we are here to support that. We thank you for putting this rally on the day of FIDA, and we will support you all the whole way, and our solidarity to Filipino unions. Thanks very much.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm very new in the trade union movement here in Australia. I'm currently doing an internship or a member organizer program with the UWU. So it's very good to see everyone standing in solidarity with the trade unionists in the Philippines. What's happening in the Philippines is not right, it's not just, and it's not fair. So it's very important that we speak up about it, let everyone know what's happening, and let's stand strong, stand in solidarity with trade unionists in the Philippines. So I'm gonna ask everyone to shout out, stop the killings in the Philippines. 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 Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am Brel. I'm from Anak Bayan, Sydney. It's a grassroots organization from the Philippines which has chapters all around the world. We stand in solidarity and in support to all trade unions, not only in the Philippines but here in Australia and all across the world. This pandemic has exposed a rotten system that is capitalism, and we have seen how our social services, our public services has suffered a lot. And we can see that our workers, our trade unions, are the main stakeholders that have been affected by this pandemic. And this is not just in the Philippines, but also here in Australia. So now more than ever, it is important for us to show solidarity, to show support, and to use our networks, to use our organizations, and to show this capitalist system that we are not backing down. We are not tolerating this system that is abusing us, and we have the power to change our society. So we, the youth from the Philippines, also heed the call of stop the red tagging, stop the military aid to the Philippines. But more than that, we should also take example from all the strikes, from all the mass protests, from all the mobilizations in Thailand, in Hong Kong, and all across the world, and do that here in Australia. And we can show that as our power, as our support comes from the trade union and the youth, we can change this system. We can topple capitalism. And lastly, it is also important for our trade unions here in Australia to advance our cause, to continually organize our people, and to make them realize that we have the power. We have the power to stop the killings. We have the power to pressure our governments, and we have the power to demand for our rights. That is all. Thank you.
Out, stop Australian military aid to the Philippines.
Stop Australian military aid to the Philippines!
Stop Australian military aid to the Philippines. Hands off Filipino trade unions. Hands off Filipino trade unions.
Hands off
Filipino trade unions. Stop the killings in the Philippines.
Stop the killings in the Philippines!
Stop the killings in the Philippines.
Stop the killings in the Philippines!
Stop the killings in the Philippines!